many decisions do you think you've made today? Like, well, I won't say you. I'll say on average, how many decisions do you think people make every
Did you
day?
look that up? Did you look that up?
I did look it up. I was nowhere close in my original guess.
God, I want to say 30. Is that way low?
Oh my God. What do you?
Is that high or low? I have
It's
no idea.
35,000.
What?
Yeah,
That's too many. No wonder I'm so tired.
exactly.
Welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week. I'm Dee.
And I'm DJ. We're two therapists who like to dive deep into everything from mental health to politics, voting, and whatever else is going on in the world.
We're here to have real conversations about life, the issues that matter, and how it all affects us. Because let's face it, there's always something more to talk about.
Exactly. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join us as we break it all down.
We'll catch you up on the big stuff, the personal stuff, and the things you didn't even know that you needed to think about.
And when we run out of time,
we'll pick this up next week.
Because there's so many like automatic decisions, right? So I'll look back to automatic decisions, but you hit on it there, DJ, is it's exhausting to make all these decisions. And how does that impact how we deal with our biases, how we manage our emotions, how we present as people when we're constantly making decisions? So it leads to decision fatigue. It leads to burnout and all this awesome, lovely, amazing stuff. So
I don't like it.
You don't like it? You don't like making decisions?
I don't like making 35,000 decisions a day.
It's a lot. So like I said, I did research it because I was just like, oh, like I thought it was like, I don't know, maybe like 10,000, maybe.
Yeah.
Because even thinking of things about like choosing which hand to use to pick up a cup, right?
Yeah.
That's a decision. Deciding to check your phone when you hear a notification or not, because phones on top of that give a dopamine hit because that's that immediate gratification. Adjusting your posture, sitting in your chair, choosing the order in which, like, oh no, this DJ, I haven't even touched the list.
That's
yet.
a lot of decisions you don't think about.
Exactly,
like
right?
Really think about, yeah.
How do you decide how to mentally engage with something? Are you skimming something or reading it? How much effort are you putting into a response? Like whether it's a text or an email or whatever, deciding whether or not something's worth remembering, adjusting your tone based on who you're speaking to. And right, like I thought about that all day today.
Really?
Use my work voice at work.
I don't think about that.
I do. I focus. Well, man, yeah, like to think about tone. Like for example, I'm on call right now, and I literally got no sleep the other night because I just kept getting calls all night. It was exhausting. And so now I have a reaction when I see the facility calling, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with this call. So I got to check myself, you know?
I guess I do check it sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, social decisions. What do you say when people say, hey, Deej, how are you?
Just usually good.
Good. Living the dream. I'm good. How are you? Right? Like
I'm not cool enough to say I live in the dream.
Oh, I say live in the dream. It's because it's what white people say when we're emotionally tortured. And as a white person who's emotionally tortured, I'll be living the dream. I recognize, but like here, okay, so like I'll switch a little into like a life hack. When I pass people in the hallway, and this doesn't even sound normal, I don't say good morning or good afternoon. I just say howdy. Every person, every situation. I saw the same coworker go up and down the hallway multiple times. We just kept passing each other, and every time, howdy, howdy, howdy. Like, and I didn't realize like it's just one way that I don't have to think about like, is it morning? Is it afternoon? Do I like?
Oh, right.
Just getting rid of those decisions.
If you're masculine presenting, you just nod a little bit.
See, I can't get away with that. People will tell me to smile more.
Oh yeah, you just nod.
Yeah. But also, I mean, like, when it comes to our biases, and I think a more interesting part of the conversation is looking at, like, when we are on this alert of engaging with people, we have to decide whether or not to engage in a political conversation or just a conversation that's frustrating us or getting our emotional response. whether or not to watch or listen to the news, whether or not to scroll Facebook, whether or not to comment on that thing, like this thing, downvote that thing, and choosing whether
decisions.
or not, and choosing whether or not to challenge a biased thought or let it pass. And that is a really difficult place to sit, is thinking about, do I challenge this internally, like with myself, or just let it go because I'm exhausted? Like,
right.
Do you ever watch the show The Good Place?
I did. I watched it during the lockdown.
I love it. Such a good Mike Schur. 10 out of 10.
Who's that?
He's done a lot of stuff. He created Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was a writer on The Office. Also plays Mose.
Okay.
On The Office.
Mose.
Yeah.
I don't like The Office.
I know you don't, but other people will
that's
get this
right.
reference.
That's right. We've talked about this before. Yeah. I can't like it.
If you're down for Mike Schur and you like The Good Place, he did write a book called like How to Be Perfect. And it's like the correct answer to every moral and ethical decision ever. It's such a good book.
Was it good? Entertaining?
But my dad currently has it.
Interesting. It's like, when you asked me, how many decisions do you think you make a day? Like when I think of a decision, I think of like something I have to like sit down and figure out, and like a life dilemma. That's what I think of, like a decision. And when you're like, you decide this and you decide that, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, we do a lot of that stuff. And so many of them are decisions you're not really putting that much thought into as you would, like, do I want to move to Barbados or something?
Exactly. Yeah. And so if you are a person who's like watched The Good Place, to like lean into that metaphor, there's a character Chidi who's like, like literally he's debilitated by decisions because he's constantly thinking about like, what is the good and right thing to do? And that's exhausting.
No, and that sounds like, and maybe I should give The Good Place a watch, since I've done some training in ERP and in OCD, because that definitely sounds like it could be morality OCD, which is somebody always,
it's 100%.
Right? Yeah. Somebody always looking for what is good or right, but like also needs like some kind of evidence what's good or right, which is really hard because like everybody's moral compass is different. And so there's no way to get an absolute.
Yeah. Like one of the things I always think of from that show is Chidi believes that a thing he did wrong in his life is that he continued to drink almond milk despite knowing the environmental consequences of almond milk. And so I always think about that. First off, it made me switch to oat milk, thinking about the environmental impact. But it's because we make these decisions without rethinking them, without reconsidering them, because they're easy,
Right. Yeah. And some of them are, and we've talked about in previous episodes about like biases that we have, like as mental health professionals, and I had brought this up in my team meeting today. We talk about like, we all have biases. We all have blind spots. We all have countertransference, and, decisions to be like, what do you do if you're working with a client who has a different point of view or a different belief? In politics is a hot topic, right? And how do you manage those biases? And you do. That isn't like one of those other choices about like, do I live with my right hand or my left hand? Because we have a dominant hand. So it's one of the easier decisions. We really have to put thought into how do we make sure that we are managing our bias so it doesn't cause harm to another person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to emphasize for people too of like, first off, normalizing and validating that if you're feeling exhausted all the time, whether it's like feeling the need to stay informed or just feeling the need to stay caught up, like that is decision fatigue. And that it's not you. Our brains are wired to conserve energy, to make connections, and to reduce cognitive load as much as possible. And challenging those things, managing bias, for example, is an active cognitive process when our brains are hardwired to try to do those things quickly. You said dominant hand. I don't believe, to my understanding, there's a set biological marker that says, oh, you're right-handed or left-handed. Yes, there's something probably in our DNA, but that's a thing that we've learned because of muscle memory, partially.
Right.
And so to challenge that is exhausting. Same thing when we're taught a certain way, we connect with people a certain way, we are used to a certain way of life, and then when something changes it and you're struck with having to to compensate and correct that thinking or change that thinking, it's exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting, I think, for anybody, and again, like thinking about our particular frame of references when we're working with people who are coming to us, because like they're also dealing with that fatigue and exhaustion. So because we have it too, we therapists get burnout, and it's really important for us to be able to recognize when burnout happens.
Absolutely. And it can happen in weird ways too. Like, I'll use the example of one of my friends, and I did not ask her if I could use her as an example, but I will anyway. So my friend is moving, and she asked me for help to pick out paint colors for her house. And this is a person who, she is one of the most intelligent, level-headed, kindest people I know. And I mean, literally like my life partner, an amazing, amazing person who can handle stress like nobody else. She's got a stressful job. She's got stressful stuff in her life, and just manages. We spent 3 hours picking out paint for like 6 rooms. 3 hours. And I'm like, I love you so much. I'm so glad I'm getting Mexican food for doing this. But it's like, it shows up like that. Do I think this, my friend's incapable? No, but it's because it was decision fatigue. By the time, you made your 30,000 decisions for the day, and now you're trying to choose between Raven's Claw and Hunter's Green for, accent wall. It's paralyzing almost. So it's, I want to validate and normalize. If you're stressing about these quote small decisions, it's not because it's the small decision. That's
right.
I don't like the term like paralyzing, but it's debilitating.
Right. I mean, I was going to say there is that term decision paralysis when there can be, whether it's because you've already made, 34,999 choices, and this is your last one, whatever the reason, like it can just be that like it just feels like too much. You just can't make one more choice. And, you literally just don't want to, can't. Or if there's too many options, like that's something too. And paint, by the way.
Oh my God, there's options. So many. We went to Sherwin-Williams, and I'd like see me, because I like life hack things, or try to. I just picked up the designer guides, and I'm like, some designer said these colors go together. Let's start there. But no, I mean, like both of my partners know I have said things before, like when I come home and it's like, oh, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, decision fatigue. I don't know.
Right.
I know I'm hungry, and that's all I know. Like,
right.
You figure it out.
Right. And it can be the other thing too. Like I know I've encountered plenty of times in my life when someone is like, what do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat? And I'll be like, I don't care. And they'll be like, you have to care. And like, I promise you, like if it really mattered to me, or if you say something that like I don't like, I will be like, oh no, maybe I do care, because I don't want that. But like off the top of my head, like I have there's nothing for me to pull from. And when I don't have any context, sometimes that can be really difficult. But there may be other days where I've been like, I really wanted, like yesterday, I really want like Indian food. But most times it's like, I don't know, put some stuff in front of me. And then I'll decide.
Again, I'm going to share like life hack, something that I do, because my hope with this episode is to kind of impart some tools too. Is thinking about, where do you want to eat? My dad and my sister love them to death. I'm using all sorts of people I've not asked their permission.
Love them to death. Consent.
There's no informed consent. Like no, I'm sorry. If you're a part of my life and you're not a
everyone
client,
has to know. Yeah. If they're a part of our life, then like, we might talk about it.
But they would starve before they'd pick a restaurant. It's gotten a lot better. But so we would start doing the 5-3-1. So one person, usually me, would list off 5 places I'm willing to eat. And I would say to like my sister, eliminate 2, which are 2 that you will not go to. And she'd be like, oh, these 2. I'm like, great. Turn to my dad, eliminate 2. Great. That's the one we're going to. Like the other one's the one we're going to. Just ways to try to filter the information differently. Yeah.
Right. Or you might have a go-to place. That's what I do. Like if I can't think of anything, maybe I'll have some chicken nuggets or something like that. Like something that I know that no matter what, I'm going to like and eat. It's worse with braces and eating out, because now I have to think about what's not going to get stuck in my teeth.
That's worse.
Yeah. Chicken nuggets also, they don't get stuck.
That's good. But yeah, I mean, like, you bring up a good point is like, what are decisions you don't have to make regularly? And, you know, knowing, okay, this is my go-to. I joke, I'm vegetarian. So anytime I go out to eat, it doesn't take me long to figure out what I want to eat. Because most of the time there's like 3 options for me.
Right.
But when I go to big cities or I go to a place that specializes in vegetarian food, I don't know how people deal with so many choices. Like, there's a psychological phenomenon that says the more choices we have, the less happy we are with any choice that we've made. Because it's always that, oh, I could have chosen this other thing. Would I have liked this other thing more? It's like, nope, keep it. There's an optimal amount of choices. And don't overwhelm yourself.
Right.
All of them.
Right. Right. And especially, like, again, if you've already made a bunch of choices today, and for like you and me, having a job where, I know for me, where having a job that I need to talk to people like all day long, like that's using up a lot of my emotional bandwidth, like holding space, like navigating, mitigating, managing biases, like making sure that, you know, my focus is on the other person, always considering their needs, you know, putting things back on them that need to be put back on them. But like at the end of a day, like there's little bandwidth a lot of times for like any other thoughts or any other engagements or decision making with people. Like I've gotten to the end of my workday, and last summer I spent a month in Ohio and worked from a hotel room there. And not only was my schedule was so off because of the time difference. So like I was working a lot later, but then like after work, like I want to obviously go see people because I'm not always in Ohio for a month. And my morning would be like, I'll come over, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to like talk or like be able to like show up and engage. Like we'd probably be better off like watching a movie or something, because like I don't feel like I have a lot of bandwidth to navigate human interaction.
But I like that you said too, bandwidth, right? And I think, and again, like normalizing, it's okay. There's a huge difference between capability and capacity. So someone may be very, very able to sit and be social and communicate effectively and do all these things. They can be very capable, but they don't have the capacity. So just because you don't have the capacity to challenge things, to sit with uncomfortable emotions, if you don't have the capacity at that time, that doesn't mean you're incapable. That means this is not the moment.
Right. Exactly. And being able to communicate that without shame, right? Because I think that, and that's why I love so much, you know, so much of the work that I do, right, is like helping people to discover their authentic self and be their authentic self. And I think like the more and more comfortable you get with that, the less that you feel shameful about things, because like you're just being honest about who you are, what you're feeling, what you're doing. And if somebody has a problem with that, then, you know, it doesn't mean like you're not good enough or you're not anything enough. Like you can insert that, because that belief goes like, so that I'm not enough belief just goes in so many places. And someone else's opinion, you know, doesn't mean that you're not good enough or whatever enough. And being okay, being like authentically you. And if you're like, hey, I don't have a lot of bandwidth, and so like this is what I'm capable of doing today, and if someone's like, that's some bullshit or something, you know, it's more a reflection on them, right, than it is on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So finding those safe people to communicate that with and to articulate and to say, hey, like, here's what I need, here's how I need it, or, you know, whatever. So when you know who then are your safe spaces to, hey, I want to hang out, but I don't want to talk. Can we just be in the same space? Like, you know, in the neurospicy world, we call that parallel play. But you just are around each other doing your own thing.
Right, exactly. And sometimes there is, you know, there might be places where we do have to show up and like give more than we might have the capacity for. And I think like being aware again, like how are you managing? How can you do your best to counteract that, you know, on any given day?
Yep, absolutely. Do you think, switching gears slightly, do you think people are more aware of their biases now than they were in the past? Or do you think that people are just more defensive about them?
That's a great question, Dee. I mean, I feel like I could answer both sides of that. I think that sometimes, and I think sometimes people maybe do both. So, I was going to say sometimes I think people can be more defensive, and sometimes people can be more aware. But I really too, I think it does go back again to like how comfortable you are, like being authentically you, and if you're not, and how comfortable you are not being authentically you, just like overall, but also maybe in that environment. Because
in
you
your
may,
safety in it,
right? Yeah. Yes, because you may just be more on guard, and that's going to come with less awareness of yourself because you're like, your fight or flight's more triggered and everything. So it could come with more defensiveness and less awareness. And when we're in our emotional mind, right? Like awareness, a lot of times is like out the door. Yeah.
Dee, I know you're like an expert with DBT. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about, like, you mentioned emotional mind, like wise mind versus emotional mind, and how you can apply some of those skills?
Yeah. So, I mean, why emotional mind, right? That's any time that we get something triggered and we're really in our feelings. And I think the thing to keep in mind about feelings is that feelings aren't always based on fact. Feelings can be based on fact.
Feelings are valid, but not always based in reality.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And remembering that, like, if we are feeling more emotional, so someone might say something to us and we can feel like, we might feel hurt, we might feel sadness, we might feel anger, we might feel whatever. And when we're in that space, a lot of your higher level skills are out the door. So thinking cognitively isn't happening. You're more reacting to whatever your feeling is. And so what I tell people when they get in like this space, and it depends, like sometimes you can use just some breathing, but you really have to like bring your stress level. So your emotional mind, if you may feel more stressed. And so you have to bring that stress level down before you can really like engage in a conversation. It might need taking some space. It might be like there's some thought to like putting cold water on the back of your neck, on your wrist, putting your face in water, some of that stuff that we see in movies, because it really can trick your body into feeling some more grounding, jumping up and down. These are distress tolerance skills. So
it has a word. What's the word? That's what I was about to start Googling. There's a word for that, like transvagal nerves.
Yeah, something. And in DBT, I always forget the acronyms, but Marsha Linehan, who is the founder of DBT, loves some acronyms. There's an acronym, I think it's TIP or something like that. TIPS.
Everything.
But it really is like just remembering that, like I always tell people, when you're in that space and you're like, why can't I think logically? It's because you literally can't. You have to be able to bring your emotional level down. You need to take some space, feel more centered in your body, ground yourself. So like physical grounding, mental grounding, physical grounding, a lot of times people do it without thinking. Like if they're sitting in a chair, like I'm rubbing the arms of my chair right now, like that's physical grounding, like rubbing your foot, rubbing your legs, you can like try and think, have a mantra. You might be able to keep that in mind if you're feeling more emotional mind. But anyway, so in the DBT world, so emotional mind is where like you're not being too rational. You're not at your best. You're not going to be able to like solve a problem logically. Like you are really just like feeling like this feels like shit or this feels whatever, and I need to like stop that feeling. And then rational mind is again where you're like all the logic, where you're and sometimes you can present in logic that doesn't have any empathy, right? That's what can happen when you're in rational mind. So like logic, and someone might be like, why are you such a jerk? Like you're not even thinking about my feelings. So that space isn't always the best space. It depends again on like what you're needing that for. Like it maybe if you're solving a math problem or something like that, when you're not interacting with other human beings always, like rational mind can be good. The DBT best place for you to be in your mind is wise mind, which is a mix between emotional mind and rational mind. And that's where you can, again, like what we do as clinicians. And sometimes we have to check ourselves because again, like when countertransference may come up, we're more in emotional mind than we are in our rational mind or wise mind. But wise mind is the balance between being able to be logical, rational, solve problems, communicate effectively, do all of those things, but also keep in mind that like people have feelings and you need empathy is important. And being in that place where you can do both, that's the DBT best place to be, is in that wise mind where you're not too much of one or too much of the other.
Love that. I promise I was listening to all of it. I just also really need the answer to my question.
I heard you typing.
I was Googling over here. Well, ChatGPT and really Google was not helpful. But no, for anyone who's studied intro psychology, the idea of like, why is my emotional mind is kind of similar to what Freud said about id, ego, and superego, but this is a much more tested, because what you're describing is areas of the brain that are being activated as well. Freud didn't do that. Freud is great in ways, but none of his theories were testable.
I love that you said oof, because I love me some Freud, and I was still like id, ego, superego, and now we use that in my explanations. Still plenty.
I think the reason I struggle with it because it's not testable. Listen, I love Freud. I think if cocaine and leeches are the cure to everything, let's do it. I don't think he did leeches. I think it was cocaine and orgasms, but whatever.
Well, maybe a little bit.
Sure. That's great. But, oh my God, I completely lost my train of thought now. Anyway, but he didn't do things that are testable. But what you're describing, emotional mind and wise mind, right? We can tie these to areas of the brain that have activity during certain things. So when something's activating you emotionally, it's not what's called your prefrontal cortex, or this area of your brain that's responsible for high-level thinking and judgment, decision-making. You're operating off of your limbic system, which is a survival area of the brain.
And your amygdala, right? Your amygdala.
That's part of your limbic system. Yep. As your amygdala, which is sometimes oversimplified to say it's like the fear center of the brain, but really it's like the awareness center of the brain. So like it makes you aware of things that you need to be aware of, which for people who have had trauma, especially, their amygdala is like, let's go, baby. Everything is something that's activating that amygdala. So it's easy to stay stuck in that emotional mind when your amygdala is like winning that boxing match.
Right. And it is like, because, people don't realize that trauma can show up in your life, especially if you have a PTSD diagnosis, right? It doesn't show up in a way that like makes sense for like what your trauma was, right? It's just a lot of times you may feel like you may have that same reaction, that fight or flight, or you may already be hyper vigilant when you go into a conversation with somebody because maybe you have like a lifetime of like verbal abuse or whatever it is. So like you're already like, your system is already like kind of like engaged and ready to like get that fight or flight like going like at the first thing. So being able to understand that, like, logic doesn't have to be there. You don't have to make sense about why is this happening. It's just knowing that like this is happening, and how can I have the skills to be able to like bring myself to a place to where like I don't feel like I'm in danger anymore.
Absolutely. Yes. And so looping back to the thing I could not remember the name of.
Yes.
Is with the vagus nerve is what it is. Because you can do like somatic regulation, which is like the sensory input, which is why like people like to hate on different things that autistics do to help regulate. But like legit, they kind of slap. Like, I don't know what the hell language I decide to speak here, but doing something sensory feels good. It's supposed to feel good. It's that stimming. You give some really good examples, but also things that stimulate the vagus nerve. So things like jumping, cold exposure. I mean, I can't remember how many times I would say things and I didn't realize what it was I need to go home and shower this day off me. Because I literally just needed the sensation of the water to reset my mind.
Right. Yeah. And it does, like, the thing is it makes sense, because if your body is going into, again, that stress level, those kinds of things are going to help. Like, your body feels like there is some kind of physical threat.
Yep, absolutely. So doing things like long exhales, humming, singing, shouting, just doing it like, I won't do it because Mike, but I
tell people to go in their car and scream.
Dude, I don't know what it's about my algorithm, but I keep seeing this thing advertised, not an advertisement because I don't remember the name of it, but it's like it looks like a tiny pillow and it's supposed to be sound blocking. So the person, like the ad, which like, who knows, like holds it on their face and just like screams, but it's very like
Mm-hmm.
It's very muffled. Yeah. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works.
I'm sure like that. I mean, I know that like going into a space and screaming can work. And I've seen posts about that on Facebook too, about lately, like, do people want to just get together and like scream together? Like that definitely, right? That definitely, you know, gets that out. Rage rooms I like too. That's why I'm trying to think the theory, it's not Adlerian, or maybe it is, that talks about anger and talks about like how those kinds of skills actually aren't healthy for anger, and I totally disagree. Like rage rooms, going and like throwing stuff, like those things are cathartic. Those things do get that energy out, and it's not in a way that's harmful to anybody. It's harmful if you're screaming at somebody. That may not feel great for you. That's not a good skill. But if you're somewhere and you're just screaming out to an abyss, that's not hurting anybody. So that's not harmful to do.
Absolutely. I like rage rooms. I went to one very early on in my relationship, and I was like, is this healthy to show how I like to smash things? I so enjoyed taking a baseball bat to like a windshield, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this man's over here thinking like, if he ever cheats on me, I'm gonna do this to him too. He's not wrong, Gary Underwood. But I'm just kidding.
But that's the thing, like, if you smashed his windshield, it would be harmful to him. Exactly. And it would be harmful. It could be harmful to you, because you might have some shame and guilt about it. But if you go to a rage room, you've paid $30 or whatever it is to like bust up a TV, that's not harmful to anybody.
No, I'm stimulating the economy. Stimulating, yeah.
Right.
It's been a long day of a lot of decisions, so stimulating. I'm stimulating the economy.
35,000 apparently, because we're talking about every single decision. And by the way, that's something that, like, when someone says something like in a therapy session, a lot of times you'll hear like, well, of course I am, like, I don't have a choice. And I always point out the choices that are so obvious to them to not take, that like, look, choice. You could do this, you could do that, you could do that. You're choosing not to do those things, right? That's a choice.
Which is both empowering in a way, to realize like, no, like, that is a choice or decision, but also like recognizing, it's just another choice. Like, it's just another thing. Choosing not to comment on that social media post that was inflammatory is a choice. And it is a choice that may protect your peace.
And it can. I like to, go ahead.
I don't know why I ended that sentence on the uphill. I don't really have anything after that. So
that was it. So I was just going to say,
a long day.
I was just going to say, like, I sometimes will go into those spaces where I know that a topic is very polarized. And when I see, especially if it's like, you know, some kind of hate to any minority, really, but especially I'll go into hate on transgender people. Like, I go into those spaces and I debate them with like facts and like evidence versus like coming in and attacking. And then somebody will attack me, and then I just come back with a fact or like an evidence, and I'll keep doing that until like they can't say anything anymore. And also, you're not getting a rise out of me, because I've researched this and I've worked on this for a lot, so I know I have lots of facts to throw at you. So I will choose to go into those spaces. Not all the time. There's some days that I know that like maybe I'll let that one go, because it does feel like a day where maybe I've had to like manage some of my bias, make sure I'm holding space for people and supporting them, and like maybe things that that I've had to like make sure I'm not like having countertransference get in the way and all that stuff. That may not be a day that I'm going to go into one of those spaces, because I don't want to go into a space and get into a Facebook war with some stranger I don't know. And that's something I consider too, is like, they can say what they want to say to me, because like, I don't know you, and your opinion of me has zero impact on my life.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even what people want. They don't really even want to be told facts. I like, when I'm frustrated and I think someone's just being biased, I just tell them, like, cite your source. Cite your source.
Right.
Send me a link. Was this in PubMed? Like, can I have the access code to this?
Yeah.
Cite your source.
Oh my gosh, I had someone do that. They brought a research article and was like, what about this? And I'm like, I scanned over the article, looked at the abstract, right? Scanned over the article, looked at the stuff, and I'm like,
the conclusions.
Did you, right? The results, all the stuff. Like, did you read this article? Because it actually says opposite of what the point is you're trying to make. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, because that actually supports my argument.
Exactly, yes. But choosing not to engage, and also deciding that it's okay to put a bookmark in things and say, like, I can come back to this. Like, I don't, like you said, today's not the day to engage with, whoever on whatever thing that might get my go. I can put a bookmark in it, and I can choose to come back to this at a later date.
Right. And I like to say that too, because I came up earlier in my team meeting where like someone was talking about if you're working with a client who has different beliefs, whatever it is, and like they're like, you can only compartmentalize for so long. And I'm like, well, compartmentalizing isn't actually a great coping strategy. Like, you can only compartmentalize for so long until you can't anymore, and everything kind of comes crashing down. But when we talk about like putting things in a container, and that means that like you're putting it away because this might not be something I can deal with right now, but you're going to get it back out and you're going to look at it and you're going to do something with it. Compartmentalization, I said, is like if you take a box and you like duct tape it all around, you like put like ropes and like chains all around it, and you put it away and you're like, never, I'm never going to look at that again. And that just isn't the way that you can approach life. Compartmentalization is not effective. I once went to, well, I've been to plenty of therapists in my life, but I once had a therapist in my 20s who said, you compartmentalize very well. And I was like, thank you.
You're like, I worked really hard on this skill.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks. I'm glad you say that.
So, DJ, let me ask you, if you had to kind of summarize a bit of what we've been talking about during our episode today, and leave one question with our listeners for them to reflect on or think about, what would that question be?
Oh, I think that, gosh, I don't know, Dee. I feel like you put me in a good spot.
Have to make.
I've already made too many. I've already made 34,900
decisions today, T.
I know. I was 35. I was really thinking about like, am I moving to the Barbados? Like, how many big decisions do we make in a day? Phew, no wonder I'm tired with all these little ones. I think that like, a takeaway is whether you're a clinician or whether you're someone who's seeking out therapy, or whether you're someone who's considered therapy or has never, and you're just like listening to us because maybe you don't have
free therapy.
Anything. Right, that's right. So I think the takeaway is just like reminding yourself that if you feel burnout, if you feel fatigued, if you feel like you just can't see one more news thing, you can't engage with one more human, that it's okay. You might feel some shame, but there's a way for you to be able to like treat yourself with compassion. Try to minimize that shame and know that like you're a human being, and it's tough out there, and there's a lot of things that take your attention during the day.
Yeah. And I would add to that, and to share that too, is to say, decide, oh gosh, another decision. Think about what are the decisions that matter to you, and those can change. Like what's your core value at the moment, and think about, is my value inner peace? Then I'll make decisions that align with that. Is my value to educate and to advocate? Then make decisions that align with that. And when we have that core value that's helping you, it becomes so much easier to choosing what value you're utilizing to navigate the world. And that can change based on your energy.
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the therapists I supervise was like, how are you doing with all this, DJ? And like, what are you doing? And I said, advocate, educate, and self-care.
Love it. Well, lovely listeners, I'm glad that a decision you made today was to listen, to tune in, to watch, however you're getting our podcasts. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube for your listening pleasure. And I hope the next decision you make, if you haven't already, is to subscribe or leave a comment, throw us a like, give us a review, whatever, all that good jazz. We love to see new faces and new voices in our comments and sharing, and it's all good stuff. We dig it. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time on Let's Pick This Up Next Week. Bye, everybody.